The hum of the lawnmower echoed through the quiet suburban street, the kind of hum that usually drowns out your thoughts. But that morning, something about the air felt different, heavy, almost weighting. The sky was clear, the sun sat high over the maple trees, and yet, there was a strange unease running through me. I was halfway done cutting the tall, neglected grass in front of Mrs. Alden's house, the 54-year-old widow who lived 2 doors down from my small rented home, when I saw her standing at the window, pale as porcelain, her trembling hand pressed against the glass. When she finally stepped outside, her voice cracked like dry leaves. "Come inside, it's urgent," she whispered. Her name was Margaret Alden, though everyone in the neighborhood called her Mrs. A. I'd been mowing her lawn every week for nearly 2 months, ever since I noticed how overgrown her yard had become. She used to keep it perfect, flowers trimmed, porch painted, even bird feeders sparkling, but after her husband passed the year before, she stopped caring. No one else offered to help her, and I guess I knew what loneliness looked like. I'd seen it in my own reflection too many times. I was Evan Carter, 27, freshly laid off from a construction job, trying to get by doing odd jobs around town. I wasn't proud of my situation, but helping people gave me a sense of purpose. Mrs. Alden had always been polite, quiet, distant, but she'd always pay me on time and offer me lemonade. Until that day, I thought she was just another lonely neighbor trying to survive her grief. I had no idea how wrong I was. When she whispered for me to come inside, I shut off the mower and followed her to the porch. Her voice trembled. "Please, hurry," she said. Inside, the house was dim, curtains drawn, air thick with the scent of old books and lavender. She led me into the living room, where a pile of scattered envelopes lay on the coffee table, medical bills, insurance letters, and something else, a small, framed photo of a young man in uniform. She sank onto the couch, clutching the photo to her chest. "It's my son, Thomas," she said softly. He hasn't called in months. And today I got this letter." Her voice broke as she handed me a crumpled envelope. It was from a rehabilitation center 2 states away. The words inside made my stomach twist. Her son had been injured badly and was asking for help to come home. But there was more. The hospital was threatening to discharge him because she hadn't been able to pay the remainder of his treatment fees. Her hands trembled so much she could barely hold the paper. "I sold everything I could," she whispered. "But I'm still short, and I don't drive anymore. I don't know what to do." I stood frozen, the reality of her pain sinking in. This wasn't just about mowing a lawn. This was about a mother terrified of losing her only child for the first time. I saw her not as the distant widow next door, but as someone clinging to hope that was slipping away. I told her I'd help. I didn't have much, but I had an old pickup truck and a heart that couldn't walk away. The next morning, I woke before sunrise. The neighborhood was still and quiet, dew glittering on the grass like tiny diamonds. Mrs. Alden met me at her porch, clutching a worn suitcase and a photo of her son. "You really don't have to do this," she murmured, tears already forming. "I know," I said simply. "But you need me to." We drove for 6 hours under the sharp blue daylight, through winding roads and endless fields. At first, she barely spoke, but as the miles passed, she started to open up. She told me how Thomas had been her pride, how he'd joined the army at 19, full of dreams. How he'd written letters every week until the day her husband died. Then, suddenly, the letters stopped. Months later, she learned he'd been injured, both physically and mentally, after a roadside blast. "He came back different," she whispered. "Angry, lost, and he pushed me away. I didn't know how to reach him." I listened, the steady rhythm of the tires filling the silence between her words. The pain in her eyes was something words couldn't carry. She had lost her husband to illness, her son to distance, and now, if nothing changed, she might lose him for good. When we finally reached the center, the air outside was heavy and dry. The building loomed gray and sterile, a place where hope and despair seemed to share walls. Thomas sat in a wheelchair by the entrance. He was 30, maybe 31, tall but thin, with sharp features and tired eyes that spoke of sleepless nights. When he saw his mother, his lips trembled, but he didn't move. Mrs. Alden ran to him, dropping to her knees, clutching his hands. "Oh, my boy. I'm here," she cried. But Thomas only stared past her, his voice flat. "You shouldn't have come." It was hard to watch. The woman who'd given everything for him was begging for a single moment of warmth. I could see how the weight of regret crushed them both. The staff told us he couldn't leave until the remaining balance, almost $2,000, was paid. Mrs. Alden looked defeated. I felt something burn inside me. Without thinking, I walked outside, called a friend, and offered to sell my old truck. It wasn't worth much, but it was enough. The buyer met me within an hour. By sunset, I was counting crumpled bills at the hospital desk. When I handed over the payment, Mrs. Alden looked at me like I'd just pulled her out of a storm. She tried to protest, but I shook my head. "Don't thank me," I said. "Just bring him home." The drive back was quiet again, but this time it was different. Thomas sat in the back seat, staring out the window, his hand occasionally resting on his mother's shoulder. He didn't say much, but when the house came into view, something changed in his eyes. The sight of the old porch, the lawn now trimmed and alive, seemed to thaw something deep within him. Days turned into weeks. I started stopping by to help around the house, fixing things, running errands, sometimes just sitting with them on the porch. Slowly, Thomas began to talk. First, just a few words. Then stories about his time overseas, his guilt, his fear that he'd disappointed his mother. One afternoon, he looked at me and said, "You didn't just bring me home, you brought her back to life too." Mrs. Alden smiled more those days. She started tending her flowers again, humming to herself in the sunlight. She'd leave homemade pies on my doorstep with little notes, "For our hero without a uniform." One morning, while I was fixing her garden fence, Thomas joined me outside. His limp was still there, but his spirit wasn't broken anymore. He asked if I'd teach him how to handle small repairs. We spent the whole afternoon working side by side. When we finished, he looked toward his mother watching us from the porch, tears shining in her eyes. "I forgot what peace felt like," he said softly. A month later, I got an unexpected envelope in the mail. Inside was a check, 3 times the amount I'd given to the center, and a letter written in careful handwriting. "Evan, you reminded me that there are still good people left in this world. This isn't payment, it's gratitude. You gave me back my son, and for that, no money could ever be enough. Please use this to fix your truck or start something new. The world needs more of your kind. With love, Margaret and Thomas Alden." I sat on my porch for a long time, staring at the letter as the sun began to dip behind the rooftops. The world suddenly felt a little less lonely. Months passed, and life began to bloom again in small, quiet ways. I found work with a local repair service and started saving for a new truck. Mrs. Alden and Thomas became like family. We'd share lunches, laughter, even the silence between storms. Every Saturday, I still mowed her lawn, not because I had to, but because that's where everything had begun. One afternoon, as I finished trimming the grass, I heard her voice again, steady this time, not trembling. "Evan," she called. I turned to see her standing on the porch with a gentle smile. "You once came inside because it was urgent. Now, I'm asking you to come in because it's family." That moment, I realized something. Sometimes the most urgent thing isn't what's breaking, but what's waiting to be healed. If this story touched your heart, please like, comment, share, and subscribe to Kindness Journal, because in a world full of noise, kindness still speaks the loudest.